The hospital changed its tone at night. During the day, St. Eliza Regional was loud with authority. Doctors issuing clipped orders, administrators pacing with tablets tucked under their arms, visitors crowding the halls with anxious questions. But at night, the place softened. The lights dimmed, the voices lowered, machines spoke more than people did. That was when Hannah Cole worked best. She moved through the surgical wing with the quiet confidence of someone who didn't need permission to exist there. Her scrubs were neatly pressed, but unremarkable. No flashy badge reels, no slogans. Her brown hair was pulled back tight, not out of vanity, but efficiency. Nothing about her demanded attention. And that was exactly why she had it, at least from the patients. Hannah checked vitals with steady hands, adjusted IV lines without waking sleepers, caught irregular heart rhythms before monitors screamed. She spoke softly, listened fully, and never rushed even when time was tight. She was, by every measurable standard, an exceptional nurse. But no one in power noticed. At least not until she made it inconvenient not to. Tonight was supposed to be easy. Her shift had ended 10 minutes ago. She was charting the last of her notes, the soft glow of the nurse's station lights reflecting off the polished linoleum. The clock on the wall ticked toward 11 p.m. Across the desk, two residents laughed over takeaway coffee. "She's still here?" one of them muttered, not quietly enough. Hannah didn't look up. "Yeah," the other replied, "she always double-checks everything, like we're gonna forget how to do our jobs." A snort. Overkill, if you ask me. Hannah finished typing, signed off her chart, and logged out. She slid her chair in neatly. No reaction, no defense. She had learned long ago that responding only fed their certainty. Dr. Marcus Bell strode down the corridor moments later, white coat crisp, confidence loud. He'd barely slowed when he passed the nurse's station. "Cole," he said, not bothering to face her, "you still here?" "Just finishing documentation," Hannah replied evenly. He scoffed. "You know the night team's got it covered. You don't need to babysit." She nodded once. "Of course." Bell paused, turning now, eyes scanning her like an inconvenience that refused to move itself. "You're efficient," he said, tone flat. "But you need to learn your place. This is a teaching hospital." Hannah met his gaze, calm and unreadable. "Understood, doctor." That was the problem. She always understood. Bell walked away, satisfied. To him, she was background noise. Useful, compliant, forgettable. The administrator on duty, Linda Carver, watched the exchange from behind her clipboard. She sighed, shaking her head. "Some people don't know when to clock out," she murmured to another nurse. Hannah gathered her bag, slung it over her shoulder, and stepped away from the station. She passed through the hallway beneath flickering fluorescent lights, her shoes making no sound. As she reached the exit corridor, a monitor alarm chirped briefly in ICU room 4, then stopped. Hannah paused. Not because alarms were rare. They weren't. But because that one had stopped too quickly, too neatly. She glanced back once. A younger nurse hurried past, oblivious. Hannah exhaled slowly and kept walking. Outside, the night air was cool, sharp against her skin. The hospital's automatic doors slid shut behind her with a soft hiss. She stood beneath the glow of the parking lot lights, adjusting the strap on her bag. Her phone buzzed. One message. Unknown number. Still in the building? She frowned slightly. Hannah didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked back at the hospital, at the ICU wing windows glowing like watchful eyes in the dark. Another vibration. Unknown number. If anything happens tonight, trust your instincts. Her jaw tightened. Not with fear, but recognition. She deleted the message. Across the lot, an ambulance screamed into the bay, lights strobing red and white against the brick walls. Orderlies rushed forward, doors flew open, a gurney rolled out fast. Too fast. Hannah turned fully now, heart rate steady, senses sharpening. A child's voice cut through the night. Thin, terrified, gasping. "Please, he won't wake up, please." Hannah was already moving. She didn't run. She never did. Running caused panic. She walked briskly back toward the doors as staff swarmed the incoming patient. A boy, maybe 8 years old, pale beneath oxygen tubing. His chest rose unevenly. One eye fluttered, unfocused. "Step back," a paramedic shouted. Hannah raised her hand slightly, identifying herself. "I'm a nurse here." The paramedic barely looked at her. "We've got him." The gurney vanished inside. Hannah stopped just short of the entrance. Her shift was over. Her badge was already clipped to her bag. Inside, alarms began to sing. Not chirps. Warnings. Hannah closed her eyes for half a second. Then she turned and went back in. Because whatever was coming, whatever always came, she had learned something long ago. that no one here seemed to remember. When systems hesitate, people die. The doors to the emergency department slammed open, hard enough to echo down the corridor. The boys' gurney burst through first, paramedics shouting vitals over one another, wheels rattling as they fought for traction on the polished floor. 8-year-old male, found unresponsive at a public pool, one yelled. Possible secondary drowning, but oxygen saturation's unstable. BP dropping, another cut in. Pulse irregular, a third voice cracked. He stopped breathing twice en route. The ER snapped awake. Lights flared brighter. Curtains ripped back. Shoes squeaked as people moved with purpose that was half training, half fear. Hannah slipped in behind the chaos, unannounced. No one stopped her. No one asked her name. She was just another set of scrubs in a room full of motion. The boy was transferred onto a bed in trauma 2. His skin had taken on that color Hannah hated most. Not pale, not blue, but something in between. Gray. Like the body hadn't decided yet whether it was staying. A resident leaned over him, barking orders. Oxygen to 15 liters. Get me respiratory. Where's peds? On the way, a nurse replied. Monitors lit up. Heart rate spiked, then stuttered. Hannah's eyes locked on the rhythm strip before anyone else noticed the irregularity. It wasn't panic-induced. It was neurological. She stepped closer. His pupils. Ma'am, please stand back, a security officer said sharply, misreading her presence. I'm staff, Hannah replied calmly, already reaching for gloves. Dr. Bell entered moments later, irritation written across his face. What's going on? Possible aspiration, maybe delayed pulmonary edema, the resident said quickly. Bell nodded, relieved. A diagnosis he knew, a path he'd walked before. All right, Bell said. Let's intubate. Standard protocol. Hannah froze for half a second. No, she said. The word cut through the room, not loud, not emotional, just firm. Bell turned slowly. Excuse me? She met his eyes. Intubation could worsen intracranial pressure if this is hypoxic brain injury. We need a neurocheck first. The room went still. Bell stared at her like she'd just spoken a foreign language. This isn't your call, he said, voice low and dangerous. You're overstepping. Hannah didn't back away. She didn't raise her voice. She just looked at the boy. His left hand twitched. Not a seizure, a reflex. The monitor beeped again, irregular, skipping. Doctor, she said quietly, that pattern isn't respiratory. Bell laughed once, sharp and dismissive. You're a nurse, Hannah. Stay in your lane. A couple of residents exchanged glances. One of them hesitated, then said, Sir, her point about intracranial pressure. Bell cut him off. Enough. Prep the tube. Respiratory moved in. Hannah's jaw tightened. She stepped back, but not away. As the laryngoscope went in, the boy convulsed violently. The monitor screamed. Heart rate plummeted. The oxygen saturation dropped. 90, 82, 75. Doctor, stop, Hannah said. Louder now. Bell ignored her. Then the boy's body went limp. Flat tone. Silence where the heartbeat should have been. For one terrible second, no one spoke. Then, code blue, someone shouted. Chaos exploded. Hands flew. Compressions began. Epinephrine was drawn. Bell swore under his breath. Hannah moved. She didn't ask permission. She slid to the head of the bed, eyes scanning the monitors, the boy's face, the subtle asymmetry in his neck. There, she said. Jugular distension. No one listened. She pressed 2 fingers gently behind the boy's ear, checking for a sign most people never thought to look for in children. Her breath caught. There it was. Doctor, she said again, sharper now. He has a tension pneumothorax secondary to neurogenic shock. Intubation collapsed his lung. Bell's head snapped toward her. That's impossible. It's not, she replied, and he has less than 30 seconds. Bell hesitated. That hesitation cost 5. Hannah reached for the crash cart. Don't you dare, Bell warned. She already had the needle. The room seemed to shrink, sound fading, until all Hannah could hear was her own breathing. Slow, measured, controlled. She marked the spot. She drove the needle in. Air hissed out violently. The boy's chest rose. The monitor stuttered, then beeped. Once, twice. A rhythm reappeared. Oxygen saturation climbed. Someone gasped. Bell stared at the monitor like it had betrayed him. Hannah stepped back, placing the needle down carefully. Chest tube. Now, she said. This time, no one argued. Minutes later, the boy was stable. Not safe. Not out of danger. But alive. The room exhaled. Bell rounded on Hannah, face flushed with rage and humiliation. You violated protocol. You disobeyed a direct order. Hannah removed her gloves. I prevented a death. That's not your judgment to make. Bell turned to security. Escort her out. Immediately. A stunned silence followed. One of the residents opened his mouth, then closed it again. Security stepped forward. Hannah didn't resist. As she was led from the room, she glanced once at the boy, now breathing, color slowly returning. Then she turned away. Down the hall, alarms continued to ring, but none of them were for her. The hallway felt colder than it had minutes earlier. Not in temperature, but in intention. Hannah walked between the two security officers without protest, her posture straight, her expression unreadable. The sounds of the ER, monitors, hurried footsteps, voices raised in clipped urgency, faded behind her as the door swung shut. "What's your badge number?" one officer asked. "Already writing?" Hannah recited it from memory. "You're suspended pending review," the other added. "Administration's been notified." She nodded once. Understood. They stopped near the staff lockers. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh white glow that flattened everything beneath it. "You can collect your belongings," the first officer said. "Then you'll need to leave the premises." Hannah opened her locker slowly. Inside were her jacket, a pair of running shoes, and a small notebook worn soft at the edges. She tucked the notebook into her bag without looking at it. Behind her, voices echoed from the administrative wing. Linda Carver was already on the phone. "I don't care what she did," she said sharply. "She doesn't get to freelance medicine in my hospital." Hannah zipped her bag. The security officers cleared their throats, suddenly uncomfortable. You can go," one said. "For now." Hannah thanked them, not out of politeness, but habit. She walked toward the exit again, the same doors she'd passed through less than an hour earlier. Outside, the night was still thick with sirens and spinning lights. Another ambulance pulled in. Another crisis queued itself up. Hannah stepped into the parking lot and stopped. Her phone vibrated. She ignored it. Inside, Dr. Bell stormed into the administrator's office, still riding the adrenaline of authority regained. "She undermined me in front of my entire team," he snapped. "That alone is grounds for termination." Linda nodded vigorously. "Absolutely, we cannot set a precedent where nurses think they can override physicians." A junior administrator hesitated. "The child?" He stabilized. Bell waved it off. "Coincidence. We were already intervening." No one challenged him. In ICU room 4, the boy lay sedated, chest tube in place, vitals holding. A pediatric neurologist reviewed scans with a furrowed brow. "This is unusual," she murmured. "If they delayed decompression another minute—" She didn't finish the sentence. A nurse nearby swallowed hard. "The one who did it, she was escorted out." The neurologist looked up. "Escorted out?" "Yes, ma'am." The doctor's lips pressed into a thin line. "Get me her name." Outside, Hannah sat on the hood of her car, the metal cold through her scrubs. She finally looked at her phone. 3 missed calls. Same unknown number. A text appeared. "Unknown number. You did exactly what you were trained to do." Hannah closed her eyes. Memories stirred. Not images, not stories. The way her hands had moved without conscious thought. The way the room had narrowed to the essentials. She typed a reply. "The child is alive." A pause. Then, "Unknown number. Barely. They're moving him to pick you. You bought him time." Hannah slid the phone into her pocket. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She watched the hospital doors. Inside, something shifted. A black SUV rolled into the parking lot, slow and deliberate, its presence out of place among the ambulances and sedans. Then another. Then a third. They parked near the entrance. Men stepped out. Not in uniform, not obviously armed, but unmistakable in bearing. They moved with quiet coordination, scanning, assessing. One of the nurses at the front desk froze. Can I help you?" The tallest man stepped forward. "We're here to see Hannah Cole." The nurse blinked. She was removed. The man's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Removed," he repeated. "From where?" "From the hospital," the nurse said weakly. "She violated protocol." The man nodded once. "Please notify administration that Commander Hayes and his team are on site." The nurse's hands shook as she picked up the phone. Upstairs, Linda Carver frowned at the interruption. "Who?" she asked. The color drained from her face as the name registered. Dr. Bell scoffed. "This is absurd. She's a nurse, not—" The doors to the office opened without a knock. Commander Hayes entered, eyes sharp, voice calm. "We need to talk," he said. "Now." Silence fell like a held breath. Outside, Hannah remained unaware. She sat still as the hospital she'd just been expelled from began slowly and irrevocably to turn toward her. Not with gratitude. Not yet. Linda Carver had built her career on composure. Budgets, lawsuits, hostile families, internal audits. She had learned to keep her face neutral, no matter the pressure. But as Commander Hayes stood in her office, that composure fractured in small, telling ways. Her fingers tightened around her pen. Dr. Bell shifted his weight, suddenly aware that his white coat offered no protection here. I'm not sure why military personnel are involving themselves in a hospital disciplinary matter, Linda began carefully. Commander Hayes didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. An 8-year-old boy is alive tonight because your staff nurse acted under extreme pressure, he said, and because of that, she was removed from the building. Bell scoffed. She violated protocol, nearly caused... Hayes turned his head slightly. Not fully, just enough. Bell stopped talking. I've reviewed the preliminary incident report, Hayes continued. I've also spoken with the pediatric neurologist and the trauma fellow who witnessed the procedure. Linda's mouth went dry. That was fast. Hayes met her eyes. Time matters to us. A beat passed. Why? Linda asked, forcing steadiness. Does the Navy care about one nurse? Hayes didn't answer immediately. He reached into his jacket and placed a thin folder on the desk. He slid it forward with 2 fingers. Linda hesitated, then opened it. Her breath caught. Inside were credentials she did not expect to see associated with a regional hospital nurse. Training records, evaluations, deployment clearances. Her eyes scanned faster. No, she whispered. Dr. Bell leaned in, curiosity overriding caution. His face drained of color as he read. That's not possible, he said. Hayes finally looked directly at him. It is, he said, and you put her in handcuffs. Outside, Hannah's phone vibrated again. This time the number wasn't unknown. Hayes. She didn't answer. She watched as the automatic doors slid open again, this time not for ambulances, but for authority. Staff had begun to gather near the entrance, whispers spreading like static. Who are they? Is something wrong? Did you see the vehicles? Hannah slid off the hood of her car and stood. She adjusted her jacket. Inside the hospital, Linda closed the folder with shaking hands. Why wasn't this disclosed? She demanded. It was, Hayes replied calmly, to the appropriate federal channels, not to hospital administrators who believe hierarchy matters more than outcomes. Bell swallowed. She never said anything. No, Hayes agreed. She doesn't. He stepped closer to the desk. Hannah Cole served 12 years as a combat medical specialist, attached to special operations units, he said. She has treated catastrophic injuries under fire. She has performed emergency procedures without imaging, without backup, without anesthesia, while rounds were hitting the walls. She requested reassignment to civilian care 3 years ago, Hayes continued. No fanfare, no recommendation letters. She wanted to be useful where no one would look twice. Linda's voice trembled. Why? Hayes considered that. Because when you're used to saving lives without recognition, he said, you stop needing it. Down the hall, a nurse whispered, That's her. That's the one they kicked out. Hannah walked back toward the entrance now, drawn by instinct more than information. She stopped just inside the doors as Commander Hayes emerged from the administrative wing. Their eyes met. For the briefest moment, something passed between them. Not familiarity, not hierarchy, respect. Hayes nodded once. Hannah, he said. She nodded back. Sir. Linda rushed forward, breathless. Ms. Cole, we'd like to clarify the situation. Hannah waited. We may have acted prematurely, Linda continued, given new information. Hannah said nothing. Bell stood behind Linda, silent now. His earlier confidence evaporated. He couldn't meet Hannah's eyes. The child? Hannah asked finally. Stable, Hayes replied. Transferred to PICU. Prognosis is good. Hannah exhaled. Not loudly, not visibly. Just enough. Linda forced a smile. We'll be rescinding the suspension, of course, and we'd like to discuss... No, Hannah said gently. The word landed harder than any raised voice. Linda blinked. I'm sorry, I won't be staying, Anna said, tonight or after. A murmur rippled through the onlookers. Hayes watched her carefully. You're sure? She nodded. They hesitated when it mattered. That won't change. Bell opened his mouth, then closed it again. Linda's face flushed. You're making a mistake. Hannah met her gaze calmly. No, she said. You did. She turned toward Hayes. Thank you for coming. He inclined his head. We'll ensure the record reflects the truth. Hannah slung her bag over her shoulder. As she walked away, this time by choice, the hospital stood silent behind her. Not dismissive anymore, not mocking, watching, learning too late what it had failed to see. And somewhere inside, an 8-year-old boy breathed steadily, alive because someone everyone ignored, refused to hesitate. By morning, St. Eliza Regional was no longer quiet. The sun rose pale and thin over the city, but inside the hospital, tension clung to the walls like static. Word had spread, fast, unevenly, and with just enough truth to make everyone nervous. A nurse had been escorted out. Military officials had arrived. A child had nearly died, and the story kept changing depending on who told it. In the pediatric intensive care unit, the boy slept under careful sedation, machines breathing for him with gentle precision. His parents sat on either side of the bed, hands clasped tightly together, eyes never leaving his chest as it rose and fell. A pediatric intensivist spoke softly. "He's stable. There may be neurological effects, but we intervened in time." The mother's voice shook. Who did that? Who saved him?" The doctor hesitated. "She's not on staff anymore," she said finally. The mother frowned. "What do you mean?" Downstairs, Dr. Bell stood in the physician's lounge, staring into a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. The room felt different now. Colleagues who had once laughed easily around him spoke less. Some avoided his eyes entirely. One resident cleared his throat. "Sir, about last night?" Bell looked up sharply. "Drop it." The resident didn't. If she hadn't acted— Bell stood so abruptly his chair scraped the floor. "You weren't in charge. I was." The words sounded hollow even to him. In the administrative wing, Linda Carver sat through a video conference with legal counsel and hospital board members. Faces filled the screen. Grim. Assessing. "Why wasn't her background disclosed?" one board member asked. Linda clasped her hands. "We were not informed of any military affiliation." "That's incorrect," another voice said. "She disclosed it during onboarding. It was noted as non-relevant prior service." Silence. Linda's stomach dropped. Outside the hospital, Hannah jogged through a public park just after dawn, her pace steady, breath controlled. Running had always helped her think, not to escape, but to settle. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. She ignored it. The rhythm of her steps matched the cadence she'd learned years ago. Slow enough to last, fast enough to matter. By the time she stopped, sweat cooling on her skin, she knew what she would do next. Inside St. Eliza, Commander Hayes met quietly with the hospital's legal team. His tone never changed. That made it worse. "This isn't about punishment," he said. "It's about accuracy. Records will reflect that Miss Cole's actions were medically sound and directly responsible for patient survival." "And Dr. Bell?" someone asked. Hayes folded his hands. "His actions will be reviewed by his licensing board." Bell felt the weight of that sentence hours later when he was asked to surrender his badge. "Temporarily," they said. He nodded stiffly. Humiliation burned hotter than anger. In the PICU, the boy's mother paced the hallway. When she saw the pediatric neurologist, she stopped her. "Please," she said, "I need to know her name." The doctor hesitated, then answered, "Hannah Cole." The mother repeated it, like a prayer. That afternoon, a small crowd gathered near the hospital entrance, staff on break, visitors lingering longer than necessary. They watched as a black SUV idled nearby. Hannah emerged from across the street, dressed simply now, hair pulled back as always. Commander Hayes stepped forward. "We'd like to offer you a position," he said quietly. "Training. Oversight. You could shape the next generation." Hannah considered that. "I already am," she replied. She gestured toward the hospital. "They just didn't want to listen." Hayes smiled faintly. "They will now." Hannah shook her head. "That's not why I do this." She extended her hand. He shook it. As she walked away, staff watched in silence. Not mocking, not dismissive. Changed. Inside, the boy stirred for the first time on his own. A monitor beeped. Steady. Strong. And for the first time since the alarms had begun, the hospital listened. 3 days passed. In that time, St. Eliza Regional learned what it sounded like when confidence drained out of a building. Conversations shortened. Laughter disappeared from the physician's lounge. Even the elevators felt different. Rides taken in quiet, eyes fixed on the glowing numbers instead of each other. People were listening now. They were just too late. In PICU, the boy, Evan, opened his eyes for the first time since the night of the code. His mother cried openly, her hand clutched around his like an anchor. His father leaned in close, whispering his name over and over, as if repetition alone might keep him tethered to the world. When Evan finally spoke, his voice was hoarse, but clear. "Where's the lady?" he asked. The room went still. "What lady, sweetheart?" his mother asked gently. "The one who fixed my breathing," Evan said. "She told me to keep my eyes on her voice." The parents looked at each other. No one in the room could explain how he remembered that. He'd been hypoxic, disoriented, on the edge. But he had remembered Hannah. Word of that moment moved through the hospital faster than any memo. A nurse cried in the supply room. A resident sat alone in his car long after his shift ended. And Dr. Bell stopped answering his phone. At home, Hannah packed carefully. Not because she was leaving town, but because she always packed like this. Methodical, purposeful, nothing wasted, nothing extra. Her apartment was spare, clean, the walls bare except for one framed photograph, turned face down on a shelf. She didn't touch it. Her phone buzzed again. This time she answered. Yes, she said. I can be there tomorrow. Another pause. No, Hannah added. I don't want recognition. She ended the call and set the phone down. That evening, St. Eliza received formal notice. An external review board would be conducting a full investigation into emergency response protocol failures. Linda Carver read the email twice, then closed her office door and sat down hard in her chair. This wasn't how accountability was supposed to work. She had followed policy. She had protected the institution. But the institution had been wrong. And it showed. Dr. Bell received his notice at home. His hands shook as he read the words, temporary suspension, pending review. He stared at his reflection in the dark screen of his phone afterward, searching for the man who had once believed he was untouchable. He didn't find him. The next morning, Hannah returned to the hospital, but not as staff. She walked through the same automatic doors, her posture unchanged, her expression calm. Heads turned. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. A nurse approached her hesitantly. Miss Cole, Hannah, I just wanted to say. Hannah nodded once. Thank you. She didn't stay to receive more. Commander Hayes met her near a conference room, converted into a temporary training space. Inside were 20 people. Doctors, nurses, residents, all seated, waiting. Some looked defensive. Some looked ashamed. All of them stood when she entered. Sit, Hannah said gently. They did. Hayes addressed the room briefly. You're here to observe, to learn, to listen. Then he stepped back. Hannah stood at the front, hands relaxed at her sides. She didn't introduce herself. She didn't tell her story. She pointed to a diagram on the screen, the simple outline of the human chest. When systems fail, she said calmly, people don't die because no one cared. They die because no one moved. She looked around the room. Protocol is a guide, she continued, not a shield. No one interrupted her. For 3 hours she walked them through scenarios, real ones, complications, split-second decisions, the cost of waiting for permission when time was already gone. She never once mentioned the boy. She never once mentioned herself. But every person in that room understood exactly why she was there. At the end, she gathered her notes. That's all, she said. A resident raised his hand, voice tight. Will you be coming back? Hannah paused. No, she said. But you will. She gestured toward the doors. You'll be back in those rooms. You'll hear alarms, and you'll remember this moment. She met their eyes one by one. Make it count. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds for the first time in days. Hannah stepped into the light and kept walking. She didn't look back, because she didn't need to. The hospital would remember her long after she was gone. And somewhere inside, a child breathed on his own. Proof that silence, when broken by courage, could change everything. The review board arrived without ceremony. No sirens, no announcements. Just a quiet procession of suits and sealed folders moving through St. Eliza Regional like a cold front. They asked for records, for footage, for statements. And this time, no one laughed. Linda Carver sat across from them in a small conference room, hands folded tightly in her lap. The walls felt closer than she remembered. You removed Nurse Hannah Cole during an active emergency, one board member said evenly. Why? Linda inhaled. She disobeyed a direct order from the attending physician. Did she save the patient? Linda hesitated. Yes, the pen paused. Then why was protocol enforced only after the patient survived? The question hung in the air, heavy and unanswerable. Down the hall, Dr. Bell faced his own panel. They didn't raise their voices. They didn't need to. You dismissed a subordinate's clinical observation without review, one member said. Bell clenched his jaw. She's a nurse. Another pen paused. Is that a clinical justification? Bell said nothing. The silence stretched. In PICU, Evan sat up for the first time, propped carefully by pillows. His breathing was still shallow, but it was his own. His mother held a small notebook, writing down every instruction, every milestone. Can I see her? Evan asked. His mother swallowed. She doesn't work here anymore. Oh, he said quietly. He thought for a moment. His father closed his eyes. Across town, Hannah stood in a converted classroom at a community college, reviewing basic emergency care with a group of volunteer EMTs. The room smelled faintly of whiteboard cleaner and coffee. She corrected hand placement, adjusted posture, asked questions that forced people to think instead of recite. You won't always have backup, she told them. So you need to know when to trust what you see. One of the trainees raised his hand. What if we're wrong? Hannah considered that. Then you own it, she said, but you don't freeze. That night, St. Eliza received its findings. Linda Carver resigned before they could remove her. Her letter cited personal reasons. No one believed it. Dr. Bell's suspension became indefinite, pending retraining and supervision. His name was removed from the attending rotation board. He watched as someone else took his place. And for the first time in his career, no one defended him. In the pediatric wing, a small sign appeared on the bulletin board. Handwritten, simple. Thank you to the nurse who saved Evan's life. No name, no title. Just gratitude. Hannah never saw it. She didn't need to. Because the work continued. Quietly, without applause, exactly the way she preferred it. And in a hospital that had once dismissed her, something had changed. Not enough, but enough to matter. St. Eliza Regional looked the same from the outside. The same brick facade. The same parking lot, filled with exhausted cars and flickering headlights at shift change. But inside, the hierarchy had cracked. Morning rounds were quieter now. Doctors paused longer before speaking. Residents asked nurses questions and waited for the answers. It wasn't humility yet, but it was caution. In the administrative wing, Linda Carver's office sat empty. Her nameplate had already been removed. The chair behind the desk was pushed in, perfectly aligned, as if no one wanted to disturb the vacuum she'd left behind. An interim administrator held meetings heavy with phrases like process improvement and shared accountability. People nodded. Some meant it. Some were afraid not to. Fear, after all, was a powerful teacher. Dr. Bell sat alone in his apartment, suit jacket draped over a chair he no longer had reason to use. He replayed the night again and again. Not the boys' collapse, not the alarms, but the moment Hannah had said no. He realized now that it hadn't been defiance. It had been certainty. And that realization hollowed him out. Across the city, Hannah finished her last session of the week with a group of school nurses. They practiced triage scenarios in a gymnasium. The echo of footsteps bouncing off polished floors. One of the nurses, young, newly certified, hesitated during a mock drill. I don't want to get in trouble, she admitted. Hannah nodded. You will, she said simply. The woman blinked. Yes, Hannah replied. If you do this long enough, you will get in trouble for doing the right thing. She paused, letting that settle. But you'll also go home knowing someone else did too. The room went quiet. That evening, Commander Hayes stood on the deck of a naval transport ship. Phone pressed to his ear as the city lights faded behind him. She won't come back, he said. A voice on the other end chuckled softly. We didn't expect her to. Hayes looked out at the dark water. She changed them anyway. That's her pattern, the voice replied. In PICU, Evan took his first steps down the hallway. IV pole rolling beside him like a loyal companion. Nurses cheered quietly. His parents cried without embarrassment. Can we find her? Evan asked. His mother knelt in front of him. Some people help us and then disappear, she said gently. That doesn't mean they're gone. Evan nodded solemnly as if this made sense. That night, St. Eliza held a mandatory training session. Attendance non-negotiable. Hannah wasn't there. Her voice wasn't either. But her lessons were. Case studies, timelines, consequences. And beneath it all, an unspoken truth. They had been given a second chance. Time did what it always did after crisis. It moved forward indifferent to lessons learned too late. Weeks passed. The hospital returned to its rhythms. Shift changes, charting backlogs, coffee gone cold at nurses' stations. But something lingered beneath the surface, a tension that hadn't existed before, a shared memory that refused to fade. People spoke Hannah's name more often than they realized. Not loudly, not officially, in fragments. That's not right, a nurse would say, and someone else would answer, check again. A resident paused during rounds one morning, eyes fixed on a monitor that didn't yet show danger, but would. Let's not wait, he said quietly. No one argued. In PICU, Evan was discharged on a clear Thursday morning. The sun poured through the windows as nurses removed the last of his leads. His father carried a small bag of belongings. His mother hugged everyone, tears unrestrained. Before they left, Evan walked to the bulletin board. The sign was still there. Thank you to the nurse who saved Evan's life. He stared at it for a long moment. Can I keep it? He asked. The charge nurse smiled sadly. I think it belongs here. Evan nodded, accepting that answer the way children sometimes accept truths adults struggle with. Outside the hospital, Hannah stood in line at a hardware store, listening to the soft clatter of carts and distant conversations. She wore jeans and a plain jacket, hair pulled back, posture relaxed but alert. A man in front of her turned around, squinting. You were at St. Eliza, he said slowly. Hannah met his eyes. Yes, you're the nurse, he said. Not a question. She nodded once. He swallowed. My sister works there, she said. Hannah raised a hand gently. You don't owe me anything. The man nodded, chastened. Thank you. Hannah didn't reply. She didn't need to. That evening she sat alone in her apartment, the city quiet outside her window. For the first time in days, she took the framed photograph off the shelf and turned it face up. A younger version of herself stared back, helmeted, dirt-smudged, eyes fierce and alive. Around her stood others, some smiling, some already gone. She studied it for a moment, then placed it back where it had been, face down. At St. Eliza, Dr. Bell completed his first day of supervised retraining. He followed orders now, listened more than he spoke. He wasn't thanked for it. That was the point. During a trauma intake that night, a nurse spoke up. Bell paused. He listened. The patient lived. No one noticed Bell afterward, and for the first time, he understood what that meant. Across the city, Hannah met with a small group of nursing students in a borrowed classroom. No cameras, no press, just folding chairs and tired faces. You won't be thanked most days, she told them. You'll be blamed, ignored, second-guessed. One student asked quietly, Is it worth it? Yes, she said, but not because they'll change. She looked around the room. Because you will. They wrote that down. Later that night, Commander Hayes received a brief message. She's still teaching. He smiled. Power, he knew, didn't always announce itself with rank or command. Sometimes it moved quietly, leaving stronger people behind in its wake. At St. Eliza, a new sign went up near the ER. If you see something, say something. If you know something, act. No attribution, no explanation, just a reminder. And somewhere in the city, Hannah slept without alarms, without uniforms, without anyone watching, content in the knowledge that the work was continuing, even without her. The change didn't announce itself. It never did. It moved the way most meaningful things moved, slowly, unevenly, almost invisibly at first. At St. Eliza Regional, the ripple from that night reached places no one had anticipated. In the emergency department, a nurse interrupted a senior attending during a trauma intake. Her voice shook, but she spoke anyway. I think we're missing something. The attending paused. Everyone waited for the correction, the dismissal. Instead, he leaned closer to the monitor. Show me. The room breathed again. In the ICU, a resident stayed late, rechecking labs that technically didn't require it. At 2:14 a.m., he caught a downward trend that would have become irreversible by morning. He didn't tell anyone why he'd stayed. He just fixed it. At the hospital board level, a policy rewrite stalled again and again. Not because of resistance, but because no one wanted to put their name on language that could be used against them later. Accountability, it turned out, was uncomfortable, and once felt, impossible to forget. Across town, Hannah sat in a dimly lit community center, folding chairs stacked against the wall behind her. A whiteboard stood at the front of the room, filled with handwritten diagrams and arrows. The class had ended 10 minutes earlier. Most people had left. One woman remained, a middle-aged school nurse with tired eyes and hands that never stopped fidgeting. I froze, she said suddenly. Hannah looked up. During a seizure last year, the woman continued, I followed protocol. I waited. And the child, he didn't make it. The words came out flat, practiced, as if they'd been said many times in her head, but never aloud. Hannah didn't interrupt. I did everything right, the woman whispered, and it still wasn't enough. Hannah stood slowly and walked to the whiteboard. She erased a small corner with the sleeve of her sweater. Protocol exists to reduce chaos, she said quietly, not to replace judgment. The woman nodded, tears spilling now. You didn't fail, Hannah continued. You were unsupported. That distinction landed hard. The woman exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for a year. In PICU, Evan returned for a follow-up appointment. He walked in on his own this time, clutching a small stuffed dog under one arm. His parents smiled more easily now, though their eyes still tracked every movement, every breath. A nurse bent down to his level. "How are you feeling today?" "Good," Evan said. Then, after a moment, "Still breathing." The nurse laughed softly, then stopped herself, realizing how close that had come to being something else entirely. In the hallway, his mother spotted a familiar name on a bulletin board, listed under external training contributors. H. Cole. No title, no credentials, just a name. She pressed her lips together, eyes shining. Dr. Bell watched from the periphery of the hospital now. Not exiled, but no longer central. He attended case reviews where his input was optional. He asked questions instead of issuing commands. Some days, he felt invisible. Other days, he felt relieved. During one late shift, a resident approached him hesitantly. "Sir, I wanted to say thanks for listening earlier." Bell nodded. "You were right." The resident blinked. "About what?" Bell considered that. "About not waiting," he said. The resident smiled, surprised. That night, Bell sat alone in the on-call room staring at the ceiling. For the first time in years, he wondered how many times he'd mistaken authority for competence. The question didn't have an answer, and that was the point. Hannah received an email she almost deleted without opening. From St. Eliza Regional Hospital Board. She read it once, then again. They wanted her input. On training frameworks, on emergency response redesign, on cross-discipline authority during crisis events. She didn't reply immediately. Instead, she walked outside. The city hummed around her. Cars, voices, distant sirens that no longer pulled her pulse upward. She watched people move through their lives, unaware of how close they sometimes came to needing someone like her. She thought of the boy, of the hesitation, of the moment that had changed everything. Back inside, she typed a brief response. "I'll review your materials." No attribution. She hit send. At St. Eliza, the reply arrived just as the night shift began. Someone read it aloud. No one cheered, but the room felt steadier for it. Because power, when it truly mattered, wasn't loud. It was the quiet certainty that when the next alarm sounded, someone would move. The city exhaled into winter. Cold mornings sharpened the edges of everything, breath visible in the air, hands tucked deeper into pockets, people moving with purpose instead of urgency. Inside St. Eliza Regional, the season brought fewer visitors, fewer distractions, more truth. A multi-car accident on the interstate tested that truth one quiet Tuesday night. The call came in at 11:42 p.m. Mass casualty. Unknown count. Pediatric involvement possible. The ERs snapped into motion. But this time, something was different. No one rushed to claim control. They gathered. A trauma surgeon took the lead, but she didn't bark orders. She asked for eyes, for assessments, for voices. "Call it if you see it," she said. "I want dissent." The words would have sounded reckless months ago. Now they sounded prepared. Gurneys rolled in fast. Blood, glass, screams cut short by oxygen masks. A teenage girl arrived with shallow breathing and a pulse that fluttered like it was trying to escape her body. A nurse, new, young, noticed asymmetry in the chest rise. "Possible tension," she said, voice tight. The surgeon didn't dismiss her. "Mark it," she said. "Prep decompression." The procedure went clean, fast. The girl lived. No one cheered. They just moved on to the next patient. In a small classroom across town, Hannah stood at the back, arms folded, watching a group of nursing students run a simulated code. Their hands shook. Their voices overlapped. They missed things. She didn't intervene. Not yet. When the simulation ended, she stepped forward. "You hesitated," she said calmly. One student swallowed. "I didn't want to be wrong." Hannah nodded. "You will be." She let that sit. "But wrong doesn't kill people," she continued. "Silence does." The students nodded, some writing furiously, others just staring. Later, alone, Hannah sat on the edge of the desk, staring at the floor. She felt the familiar pull, the one that always followed moments like this, the urge to step back in, to take responsibility again, to be the one in the room when everything went sideways. She resisted it, not because she couldn't, because she didn't have to anymore. At St. Eliza, Evan returned for a final checkup. He ran down the hallway this time, laughing, his parents trailing behind him with exhausted smiles. A nurse stopped him gently. "Slow down, hero." Evan grinned. "I'm not a hero." The nurse smiled. "You survived." "That's because of her," Evan said matter-of-factly. The nurse followed his gaze to the hallway wall, where a new plaque had been mounted quietly, without ceremony, in recognition of extraordinary service rendered without recognition. No name. Evan nodded at it, satisfied. Dr. Bell passed by later that afternoon. He stopped in front of the plaque, longer than most. He didn't touch it. He didn't need to. That evening, Hannah received a message from Commander Hayes. "You did what you said you'd do." Hannah typed back. "They learned." A pause. "There's a difference." She turned her phone off after that. The work was done, or at least, her part was. The city lights came on as night fell, each window a quiet story unfolding. Somewhere, alarms would sound again. Somewhere, someone would hesitate. But somewhere else, someone wouldn't. Years later, no one would remember the exact date. They would remember the outcome. St. Eliza Regional became known not for awards, not for marketing slogans, but for something harder to quantify. Nurses stayed longer, residents burned out less often. During emergencies, voices layered instead of collided. People listened, not because they were told to, because once a lesson had been carved into the building so deeply it could not be painted over. Hannah Cole never returned as staff. She didn't wear a badge again, didn't take a locker, didn't sign charts under fluorescent lights at 3 a.m. Instead, she moved quietly between places that needed her most and noticed her least. Community clinics, schools, training rooms with bad coffee and flickering projectors. She taught people who would never be interviewed, never celebrated, never applauded, and she preferred it that way. Sometimes, late at night, she still woke to the echo of alarms that weren't there, the phantom weight of a room holding its breath. She would sit up, breathe slowly, remind herself that she didn't have to run toward every crisis anymore. Others would, because she had made sure of that. At St. Eliza, the boy who had almost died grew up. He forgot the hospital smell, forgot the machines, forgot the fear, but not completely. Years later, when he volunteered as a junior EMT, someone asked him why. He shrugged. "Someone once didn't wait," he said, "so I won't either." He didn't know her name. He didn't need to. Dr. Bell never fully regained his former status. He regained something else instead. Something quieter, less impressive to outsiders. Perspective. He became a better doctor, not because he was punished, because he had been exposed. Linda Carver moved on to another role, another institution. Her resume remained intact. Her confidence returned. But there were moments, quiet ones, when she remembered the nurse who hadn't raised her voice, hadn't argued, hadn't begged, who had simply acted and walked away. Hannah kept one rule for herself. If someone asked her who she was, she answered honestly. If they asked what she had done, she kept it brief. And if they asked why she never stayed where she changed things, she smiled softly. "Because the goal isn't to be needed forever," she would say. "It's to leave people who don't freeze." The world, after all, didn't lack heroes. It lacked permission. Permission to speak. Permission to act. Permission to be wrong for the right reasons. Hannah had never asked for that permission. She had simply moved when time ran out. And long after her name faded from memory, that instinct remained, alive in the hands and voices of people who would never know where it came from. Hospitals never stop breathing. Even in the quietest hours, something hums behind the walls. Oxygen flowing, monitors whispering, hands moving in shadows where no one is watching. Lives are balanced there every day, not by speeches or titles, but by people who notice what others overlook. Hannah Cole was never meant to be remembered. That was the truth she understood better than anyone. She didn't want statues or plaques or viral headlines. She didn't want apologies whispered too late or praise offered only after danger passed. What she wanted was simpler and far more difficult. She wanted people to move when it mattered. Somewhere tonight, a nurse will hesitate with a hand hovering over a call button. Somewhere, a resident will feel the weight of protocol pressing against instinct. Somewhere, an administrator will choose safety over certainty. And somewhere else, quietly, someone will step forward anyway. Not because they were told to, not because they were protected, but because once, someone like Hannah showed them that hesitation has a cost. These are the stories that never make the news, the moments that don't trend, the lives saved by people whose names you'll never know. And maybe that's the point. Because the world doesn't change when heroes are praised. It changes when ordinary people stop waiting for permission. So the next time alarms sound, real or metaphorical. Remember this: power doesn't always wear authority, courage doesn't always announce itself, and the most important decisions are often made by the ones everyone else ignored. If this story stayed with you, like, subscribe, and comment what you would have done.